All right, so I'm thinking random thought at one before I started eating. And I'm thinking, since I belong to the first group of people that migrated out of Africa, I'm always thinking like why they would have left, what would have been their mental state when they left, and what would have made them leave or made them want to leave in the first place. And then I'm always thinking like because what we learned in the US about tribes, the most that we learned about tribes after, let's say, we didn't really learn much about tribes, but in my 20s I learned about some tribes, how basically men protected the women. Women were up in the little huts and stuff, doing women stuff. And then I thought about it and I'm like, then later on, they moved from that type of structure to, and it depended on, because some tribes, but from the earliest that I was able to see, it seemed as though the women were collected, the men were collected, and everybody had one big house, but the women and children were up in the huts most of the time doing crafty stuff, and the men were always out busy hunting. So why I thought about that was because I saw an article the other day that this guy wrote about the first migration, and he was like, they migrated for food when food populations went low. They probably migrated for food when food populations went low, and they probably didn't know that they were actually migrating, which I highly, highly, vehemently disagree, because modern tribes do migrate with the food, and ancient tribes did migrate with the food, but they were so advanced, even if they were early hominids, they knew when the sun was rising and the sun was setting. They knew where the animals were going because they were watching the animals, because they had to eat the animals. So they knew, at least generally, how far they were going to get to an animal's, let's say, grazing area or water hole, their normal hangout spots. But then once the animals started to migrate and they left the areas, then it was like, oh, they're going farther. So then they would go back to their area and then feed off of things that were in their area to sustain themselves, because they're like, I don't know if I could travel that far. Like, when you walk in the city, you're like, I know how far I can walk before I get tired, and I know how far I can walk and get back to my apartment before my ass gets tired and has to call a cab. So that's just something that you just know as you go out and start walking. It's something that just is like divinely comes to you. You're like, oh, listen, I'm getting winded. Let me start getting myself back in the other direction. And then you go back and you get back where you came from. And then as your stamina builds, you go further. But animals don't operate like that. Animals have their little areas that they go to where their food sources are. Then when their food sources and the water runs low, then they go and they move. So, but there's always localized animals of different sizes, usually smaller sizes, that like stay in the areas because they feed off of like fish and things like that. So like birds. But like if you're a group of people, you need freaking larger animals. So I would see them as being intelligent enough, because I do this now, and I don't really spend extensive time out in survival mode out in the wild, but I do over the winter time fatten myself up like a bear, hibernate, and then as springtime gets here, I do my exercises and my stretches, and I get my stamina up, and then I venture off into the wild and hike and hike and hike. So, if I were to put myself in their shoes, for one, early women would have been like more into whatever was near them, which would have been the men that were near them. But then after a while, I don't see them just being straight. That's just not a reality. And because personalities don't work that way. They don't work that way. So, and sexual preference doesn't work that way either. So, I could see like even like if you look back at like Viking women or like Amazonian women, they were like strong women. So I just find that I think that that personality would clash with specific type of males because that's exactly what I experienced in my life. Not to say, uh, masculinity is any type of way, but the energy, if it's not balanced, then it's gonna be you're bumping heads with someone. Or if, for example, if I'm a woman that is sitting around and I don't feel like freaking weaving a basket, I'm the type of woman that's like, oh, let me go look at these rocks. Let me go look at these crystals. Oh, let me examine these bones. Those type of women would have been like, all right, I'm tired of sitting up here in this little hut. Let me get down there and go do some stuff. And then that's probably where they got the story of Eve taking the apple from the tree. Because I look at it like this. If dudes were like, oh, we'll protect you and we'll get food, I wouldn't have been arguing. I would have been like, all right, well, go get your food. Go get the food for all of us and we'll do whatever. And then while they were gone all day, what time did they have to be picking up rocks and fucking around with shit? They would have been trying to hunt. Or going to search for crystals and shit in random ass caves. They would have been like in the rainforest looking for animals, or out in the plains looking for animals to kill and making traps and stuff. I could see them doing that. But when it comes down to like saying them coming back and us being like, look what we did with these crystals. Oh my gosh. And look what we found in this cave. And do you believe that we put this shit in this pan of water and blah, blah, blah. It just created this effect. And look, there's light, whatever. So I could see them being super enthralled by that. And then them saying, well, let's do something with that. And we'll build whatever you need for that. I could see them doing that. But being in cultures where they needed to focus mainly on food, some people need to focus mainly on food and other people need to focus on, let's say, child rearing, and then other people which would have been like the elders would have been taking care of the children, while like the younger kids and the middle-aged people were like out there exploring things because they would have been the ones to fit in small cave areas and get in really brush filled areas without getting cut up like that. They would have been out there looking all up and stuff. So for one, I don't think they were dumb when they left, because they already would know that they were going to go on a long ass journey, and they would have gone and done it during warm times, and they would have bulked up on fatty like wild boar before the winter before they left. And the reason I say wild boar is because it would have been technically the fattiest thing that was out there, aside from like whale or dolphin or whatever that would have been difficult to catch without too much struggle. But for them to catch a wild boar, first of all, they wouldn't even have to go looking for the wild boar, because wild boar, from my experience of wild boar in the South, that shit comes to you. That shit wants to kill you. That shit, you don't have to go looking for it. It will find you and chase your ass down. So they wouldn't have had to like run after it or build spears or anything like that. All they would have had to do was dig a hole big enough for that fucking thing to fall in, and then let it start chasing them and run and jump over the hole, and then the pig's in the hole, and then all they gotta do is fucking set that fucker on fire. Or, you know, kill it with a knife. But I highly doubt that they would have been trying to get close to it. They would have set that shit on fire, let that shit burn, listen to that shit scream till it was dead. And they didn't need to build a fire pit because they already built a fire pit. So they would have just had to cook it until it looked like it was done. And it would have been done. Now, they could have possibly like beat it over the head with stones and then tied some ropes around it, pulled it out, cut it up, and, you know, obviously made use of like curing it with salts and things so that it would last. Which I think that that's what they would have truly done, because they would have already had the understanding of how to cure meats. And if it was wintertime, they wouldn't even have to cure the meats. They would just stick that shit in the snow. But in order to get themselves ready for a long trip, then they would cure meats. And they would have the time to travel to salted areas or use seawater and create some salt from the seawater and cure the meats. So that would have been a whole fucking process. Like, that would have taken a while. They would have been able to eat a couple boar throughout the winter with like yams and whatnot, and then fatten themselves up enough to be able to take a long journey. They would have used the pig skins for water skins, and they would have for water containers. So most of their winter time would have been sitting around building freaking or crafting like water jugs and shoes and whatnot. So they definitely, even though they could have made like fried, you know, like they could have like just boiled the pig skin, they wouldn't have wasted the pig skin like that, because the fat was the most important part of it, and the meat was the most important part of it, more so the fat. So they would have cured the leather by the fires easily, made themselves some like pig leather, whatever, and got themselves ready to go on a journey. And then they would have went on a small little expedition, and they would have took all their shit with them, and everybody would have been super hefty because they would have been eating pork and fucking potatoes all damn winter time. And they would have been strong enough to carry a shitload of water, which would have got them very far. And because they had to do a lot of physical activity anyway, even though they gained a lot of weight from eating the pork, they would have just been strong with good stamina from the summertime heat. Then on top of that, they would have been stocky, so they would have been able to carry a lot of water. And once that snow started melting, it's not like they had to wait for the rain. Even though the rain came, they really didn't have to wait for the rain either, because they would have had overabundance of snow, and all they would have had to do was kind of like use this take ice and keep the ice underground, or like in those bags underground, and just add like little pieces of ice to it as the ice melted. Kind of like how you do like with a cooler. That way, that water would have been pure water. And they could have taken that water with them. Or, since they got much more rainfall probably back then, they could have just waited until the rainy season, collected their water, and then started embarking on their journey during the rainy season, which would have been smart. Either way, they could have did it, and they wouldn't have had to be so damn cold. But as long as it was like spring, once the ice starts melting, then they would have started to kind of head out. Then they would have made it really far until it started to get sweltering as fuck hot. But they would have had all these bags of water, so they would have been able to get super far like that. Super far. That would have, and it's not something that's like inconceivable. That's like, if they were living like that already before they left, then leaving would have been no big deal. They would have had to condition themselves, but that's it. And they would have been able to get far as shit. Now, they went out to Asia first. So they probably passed through India. And all that shit along the way. Then they traveled up through Soviet Union. And probably some split off and went in one direction and crossed the snowy stuff, the icy stuff. And the others possibly just went down into Europe. But it's a possibility that they all could have gone, that they could have gone through Europe first and then decided to travel north. Or they could have went north, went back down into Europe, and then realized from the Europeans that they would need, that water would be too far to cross. And it didn't freeze like that. So the last place that they would have seen something they would have been able to cross would have been up in Russia, where they would have crossed over, or in Soviet Union, where they would have been able to cross over into Canada, or Alaska. Is it Alaska? Yeah, I think it's Alaska. Yes, Alaska. Then they would have crossed over, chilled out in Canada, and then got through the middle of Canada and been like, it's all these fucking trees. It's cold up here. This shit is crazy. The moose are like the size of, I never seen some shit like this before. This is like, and it's not like giraffes. Giraffes are tall. They don't fuck with you. They leave you alone. You go into Canada, you see a moose. Imagine, imagine they go to Canada and there is nothing like that in Africa. They might have possibly seen something like that. Is it Soviet Union that has moose, or is that reindeer that they have? Do they have moose and reindeer? I think they have reindeer only. I don't think they have moose. Either way, they would have been trying to get away from the moose. Nobody wants to fuck with the moose. When you look at a moose and you see that fucking thing, you're not trying to fuck with no moose. Nobody, unless you have a gun. There's no goddamn way. There's no way. So, because they not only can swim, and still swim to you and fuck your ass up. Especially if they're in mating season. They might run away from you in a certain season. But when they're all in that, I'm going to fuck something up that's in my territory season, they're going to try to fuck you up. Even if they were living around lions and tigers and jaguars and all that, at least they could like spear that. You know what I'm saying? Like, at least they could spear that. They could put it in they could get a nice enough rope trap to trap it in a rope and quickly like run up on it and slice its throat with a spear or a couple arrows, But not a moose. Not a moose. Not from the pictures of the shit that I've seen coming out of Canada, and that shit is regular shit from every day, of every day now. So I'm thinking back then the shits were even bigger. They were probably even way bigger. So I see them not trying to fuck with no moose and saying, maybe we need to go down to where it's away from this. We need to get away from this. And they would have been able to keep track of where they were going. At least, yeah, they would have been able to keep track of where they were going because of the stars. But Then they would have went south. Probably would have ended up in the middle of the U.S., the northwest, the middle, and in the north Midwest, and then they would travel south from there. Been all up in there. And then when it got cold there, they would have went south. When the time they hit south and they got to them beaches, and they were like, finally, we come to some place that's like kind of like where we lived before, like in the deserts. They would have chilled there for a while. Then they would have been like, well, we need to go to where there's water, where there's like good fish. They would have went more south. Then they would have been like, damn, are we getting back home? Because then once they got to like the islands, they would have been like, damn, we must be getting close to back to home. But then when they realized their asses were no fucking where near home, because they had to cross over a shitload of water, they would have been like, all right, well, we're just going to have to stay here. This is close enough to home as we're going to get. This is fine. It's beautiful here. It's a paradise. And they would have stayed there. And the most that they would have done is go, like, visit, like, islands that were close enough for them to get to. I see that being a thing. That's the only reason that makes sense of how they ended up with Colombian DNA. So they would have went through South America too, and then have Taino DNA. So they went from up. They came from up and went down. And if they came from up and went down, the motherfuckers went up. They went across, up, all the way over there, crossed over that damn ice, came down there, left a couple of their asses over there in the fucking snow up there, came down through here, left a couple of their asses over there. Because after a while, some people would have just been like, you know what, I like it here. And they would have moved on. People would have had kids and everything. So, like, people would have been like, I got babies and shit. Like, I'm not trying to be walking on nobody's damn road with these fucking kids. And we would have been like, all right, well, we're going to keep walking because we got to see it all. We need to see it all. That we would have left them and their fucking babies and their baby daddies over there too. And we would have fucking kept walking and covering this damn earth and ended up in Puerto Rico. Little did we know, some of our own damn relatives, the second group and the third group of their asses, went up into Europe, started mixing and mingling with those people up there. Some of them stayed. Some of them came back. They probably got into fights up there because, you know, the Neanderthals were lit. So, you know, they were over there probably having scuffles up there. And we're probably like, all right, some of us need to come back. Or some of the other ones either got captured. Maybe they made friends. We don't know. And then next thing you know, these motherfuckers are coming over here, going to visit goddamn all the places that we already went to. Talking about this is my shit. I'm taking over. Because if we were like the first people to go to a certain place, we wouldn't have been like trying to take over nothing. We would have tried to be like friendly. Because if you want to plan a long journey, you're not going to try to be like having too many problems, you know. You're not going to be trying to be hostile and whatnot. You'd be like, oh, hey, you know, oh, hey, I'm just passing through. I'm not trying to stay and fuck up your vibes, but we're just passing through. Can we stop and get some shelter? Blah, blah, blah. We're just, you know, tourists, whatever. And they would have been all right with that because most of these people had their own shit going on probably. Even though you also have to think, what if there was nobody where they went? So then it would have been like we were just dropping people off that got pregnant and shit along the way. But there was other groups. There's definitely other groups of hominids. Or homo, homo erectus and all the homos, which to me is just epic because I'm a homo. So we would have been one of the ones, somewhere in that DNA that we would have been one of the ones that were like, let's go, let's get the fuck out of here. They could sit here and get pregnant and fucking keep popping out kids and whatever the fuck they're doing. Let them stay there, and we're out here. We're on our way. And not to say they weren't getting any, because obviously they were getting some. They were getting some along the way. But as a group, we would have been, hey, this one found somebody they like over here. They want to stay over here. Okay, you stay over there. We're gonna keep on going now. We'll come back if we get back. We'll come back and visit. It's not. I don't know. We'll see you when we see you. And we kept on fucking going. Then people would have been like, if they were different types of people and they were like in those places and they were asking us where we came from and stuff, we had to stay with them long enough to figure out their language, or at least to figure some kind of communication out. And then it would have been like, well, you came from far, like far. We're like, listen, this is how many sun ups and sun downs that we've been traveling. Yo, we've been traveling sun up and sun down so much that I'm telling you, we've been going, but we're going to keep going. And then they would have been like, what? You went that far? What? Oh, we going with you. And so we could have gained people to our little group. Because that's the only thing that I would think of why, like, a Denisovan cave would have had, like, all these different types of bones from different species of humans in one place. Like, we would have been like, let's go. Especially if we got drunk, we would have been like, let's go. Got drunk off of some rainforest, some fermented rainforest, whatever the fuck. And we would have been like, all right, come on. Grab your animal skins. Let's go. And then we would have went and kept moving. But once that cold hits, especially since everywhere, like, we would have known our climate because we would have stayed in our climate, and our climate would have been what it was for a specific allotted amount of time. But then as we traveled, we would have had to be able to at least get to the point where we communicated with them when it starts raining a lot, so that we can start traveling again. Because it's better to travel in the rain when you know that you're about to pass the springtime and then it's going to get hot and you don't want to be running out of water. Or you don't want to be traveling in the cold. Like, nobody wants to do that shit. Nobody. Only the Russians like that shit. And people in fucking Canada. And the ones that we left over there in the cold. The ones that we left in the cold, they love that shit. We don't love that shit. We don't. We would have been like, we want to find the beautiful, most perfect place. And then we would have kept going. So, since, beauty is relative, some people would have been like up there in Bumblefuck. Other people would have been over there in other Bumblefuck. Other people would have been in other Bumblefucks. So, I think that, because then after the women were in the huts, and that was the women and kids were in the huts, and everybody was in that whole, in Africa, where that's how it was set up. Then you noticed how they moved from that type of structure to, like, men having their own huts and then a lot of wives. So I don't know how they talked them into that, but I don't know how that would have been a thing. Like, because initially it wasn't a thing. It wasn't like, oh, we're taking all these wives. So I don't think that that would have been a thing. I think it was started out with, if they're claiming that it was Adam and Eve, or two beings, then it was started out small and then expanded, sure. But then to sit there and have them all in the hut, sure. But then as they had sons and stuff, so what did they start, like, all fighting over the women? And then they started to be like, oh, well, we're going to have to make a lot of them so we can separate them like that. Like, or when they went and started traveling, they seen other beings, and then they were like, oh, let's see if we can bring one of them, stuff like that. What are you doing? So now in, let's say, modern day Africa, that's what you still see. You still see, like, men with multiple wives, and then everybody's in like a big group. And I wouldn't have been trying to be subscribing to that. A person like me wouldn't have been trying to subscribe to that. So we would have been like, oh, you can keep all that bullshit. Let's go and fucking travel. Nobody has time to be held down like that. We're going to sit here forever? Forever. Until we die? That's how we're going to do? We would have been like, fuck this. We're out. Surely we would have needed the food. But clearly, they didn't need to go anywhere just for the food. I don't think they would have just needed to go. And because even now, there's still an overabundance of wild animals. There's a lot of wild animals in the safari. But back in bumblefuck time, back in pre whatever, the fucking animals were probably everywhere. There was probably shitloads of them animals. So for them to say, oh, we're just gonna leave because the food, no, the food always stayed. The food always stayed. Africa is so goddamn big, them fucking animals don't need to go anywhere. They don't need to go anywhere. They could travel up and down Africa. They don't need to go nowhere. Because they have a vast variety of terrain that they could be in versus, oh, let me leave the continent. So for the humans, they would have been like, or the hominids, they would have been like, homo whoever's. They would have been like, no, we want to expand our horizons. And then they would have fucking left. And that's it. Surely they would have gotten food along the way. But it wouldn't have been like, oh my God, we're dying and we can't get food. Especially in a fucking animal populated ass Africa. They didn't even have enough of them back then to be even eating all the food like that. And they had an ocean. They were surrounded by ocean. So, like, and that shit didn't freeze. So they could have been fishing in the ocean in the wintertime. Very easily getting fish. Very easily. Because the fish would have came closer to the shore when it got colder. Because it's colder in the deeper parts of the ocean. So when it started to get cooler, the fish would have went closer in. They might have hunted land animals when it was hot outside, trying to catch them up, get them caught up at the watering holes and whatnot. But they don't even fucking leave Africa now in the wintertime. The fuck? Why would they leave then? It wouldn't have been for no damn food shortages. Trust and believe that. It wouldn't have been for no damn food shortages. They could have just went somewhere else in Africa. And for them to even think, for the professionals that wrote this article, to even think that that was the only reason why they left Africa is kind of like asinine to me. Because, and it makes you realize that they've been taught that Africa, like they're looking at maps that show Africa is like small and closely comparable to like Russia in size, when that shit is massively bigger than Russia. Massively. So it makes you think small when really the place is big as shit. They didn't need to go nowhere else. That would have been how, let's say they all originated from the Congo. That would have been their asses leaving the Congo. They would have left the mountain in the Congo and they would have started branching out from the Congo, and that's how their asses got all the fuck away around Africa. That's how their asses got all the way across Africa. They said, oh, we got to go follow this meat. And then they were like, oh, there's an overabundance out here. Because it's not many animals. If you came from out the mountains, it's only a specific type of animals that are in the mountains. And it's highly unlikely that they're going to be sitting there trying to fight no damn, gorillas packs and shit. So they would have been branching outside of the mountainous areas and getting to more flatter land if they could. And when they got to the flatter land, they realized, oh, well, the animals move around down here a lot more. So, but I still wouldn't sit there and venture to say that they left there because of food shortage. Like, no. Maybe food shortages in the fucking mountains, and even then, you got yams in the mountains. You could live off of yams. You could live off of yams and birds that you catch, easy. And there was a shitload of birds more than there is now when they're fucking poaching them and sending them all over the goddamn globe. So I hardly think that they would have just been killing all the birds and not letting no eggs hatch and not letting the moms take care of the eggs and whatnot. No, I don't think that. Not at all. They would have been traveling where in the North Africa where the boars were for a certain amount of time. Then they probably could have took them down some giraffes because it would have been easier for them to kill a big ass giraffe, and then it would have been to try to like kill I don't know, a lion or a tiger. And they probably were using the damn lions and tigers. They probably had lion and tiger cubs themselves. So maybe if they had lion and tiger cubs, which is a possibility, because I would have definitely done that. Especially with them big ass animals around, I might have stole me a couple lion cubs and shit, and maybe a couple jaguars. So I had some night killers on me. And I would raise them up and then took their asses out and went on hunting expeditions with those big ass animals. And then we could have took down a fucking giraffe with no problem. So we wouldn't have had no food shortages. It wouldn't have been no damn food shortages. Now, we might not have, we might not have took down no elephants because it takes a whole pack of lions to maybe kill an elephant. We might have got a baby elephant, but since elephants have long memory, they would have remembered us killing their babies, and they would have had a fucking lifelong grudge against us, because they're not if they can't forget it, they sure as shit are not going to be sitting there just letting us off easy for killing one of their babies, because they're emotional. And they got tusks, and they can trample your ass over. They would have trampled our villages down. They would have trampled our shit down easily. We would have been like, God damn, we would have had to go living in the trees and shit to get away from their asses. We would have had to go live in the mountains for a certain amount of time. So if you killed a baby elephant, your ass is fucked. I'm telling you. And with no gun. If you don't have no gun, you're fucked. So they didn't have no gun, so their asses were fucked. Some of them were definitely probably fucked. They definitely probably killed their asses an elephant, and the elephants were like, you know what, fuck them. I'll kill every last one of them I see. Next time I see a human, I'm fucking it up. Next time I see a little establishment, those little twigs they put together, nah, I'm fucking that up. They would have did that, because it's not like they had log cabins and shit. The motherfuckers that's why they had the women up in the that's why they had the women up all the way up in the little huts, because imagine the elephant with a grudge trying to knock that shit down. They would have had to put that shit in the rainforest, really, where the elephants are really not trying to be, wasting energy knocking down trees and shit. They would have made little clearings in the deep forest, and they would have been hiding out in there because their asses would have been in trouble. So, I don't believe that they just left for food shortages. I really do think that they fucking left either because they were just like very one group of types of people were just like, this hunkering down shit is not for me. And 2, because they wanted to maybe prove themselves to themselves, like, how far can I go? And 3, because they were smart enough to know that these dumbasses were over there killing baby elephants. That these dumbasses were over there killing the baby elephants, and knowing good and well that daddy elephant with his tusks was about to roll up in there and kill us all. And we would have been like, we don't want no part of that. We not messing with them elephants. Them elephants don't mess with nobody. Why you messing with them elephants? All the animals you could be killing, you messing with them damn elephants. We would have left it alone. We would have left that shit right there and kept it moving. We don't have no time for no stupidity. We would have kept it moving. So, I think that that's what happened. And then we would have spent, like, time in the new places that we went, so we could check out the areas, see how the seasons passed. At least a year. At the least. Because And that's at the least. That's if none of them got pregnant and had to deal with no damn babies. Because most of these women wouldn't have really been trying to carry no babies on the trail. I mean, most women today don't want to be carrying no babies on a plane. So, and they don't even have to carry them like that. Imagine you hiking. Anything could jump out at you at any moment in time. Any being can jump out at you any moment in time. A baby is not for the trail. Not for that type of trail. So they would at least let it get old enough to be able to fucking keep up with them. Or they would have had to get left behind. If we wanted to move on. Nobody told them to get pregnant. Shit. That's how I would have looked at it, because that's how I look at it now. Nobody told them to get pregnant. Some of them might have even been like, you better not leave me. And they probably could have left their kids and everything. You never know. They could have been like, you know, some of them could have been like, I don't want to leave the group type situation. Peer pressure. And even left their kids behind. We don't know. A lot of stuff like that runs through my mind. Like, I'm like, there's probably some crazy shit going on back then. Like, just wild. But, so, there is a strong possibility that it wasn't even aliens that came down and gave them technology. It could have been a lot of women that were just really looking around and experimenting with stuff and finding all kinds of stuff, like, and just messing around with stuff while these people were out there getting our food. And then they could have been like, you know, building on it. But that would make sense as to why so many cultures had like how that would explain how like Africans built the pyramids and they had like the technology for like electric power, and like also the Hindus had it as well. And then they would have been like looking at them like, dang, they're gods. And who's to say that they didn't build some crazy ass headdress along the way to look scary? We don't know. They could have done that. They could have put like feathers and shit on them to keep them cool because the animal skins were too much. And they had to cover their skins, but, you know, and maybe they wanted to cover their skins because they probably didn't have to, but maybe they wanted to cover their skin. And instead of putting thick animal skin on them when it was warm, they had it just packed up in a little caravan with them. And then as they like killed random ass birds, they just kept the feathers, made pillows and shit, made headdresses like the Native Americans did. The Native Americans made headdresses out of eagle feathers. If the Native Americans made headdresses out of eagle feathers, it's more than likely that we started that shit in fucking Africa and took that shit, and as we went and every time we killed a bird, we kept the damn feathers and we made little fucking helmets out of them and made cool shit. Like, just because we were walking doesn't mean that we would have lost our like craftiness and like our intellect, so, and or our spirituality. So we probably would have got more spiritual on the walk, because they say Jesus walked 40 days and 40 nights, and before he finished, he was hallucinating and everything up in that bitch. So imagine a group of people traveling more than 40 days and 40 nights. Imagine that. They would have been seeing all kind of shit. They would have been fucking exhausted. Even if they stopped for a while to rest, they would have been like, you know, just a little, they still would have been having to travel. And they would have wanted to push themselves a little further. So They could have came up with all kinds of stories along the way. Your mind starts thinking up all kinds of stuff with the more you interact with that's different from your surroundings. So by the time they got over to Asia, they probably had a whole lot of good stories going on over there. And they would have encountered a lot of different types of birds, like the birds that you see in Australia, and like there's ostriches in Africa. So like those are big ass birds. Like they could have learned a lot from them. Because those birds don't even fly. So all of the art that you see on the walls, you see wings on the back of a person. Wings on the back of the person, they're saying that that means that it symbolizes movement and whatnot. Whereas some people took that as it symbolized flight. But if you think about ostriches, they don't even fly. They got wings though. But them fuckers will chase your ass down in a heartbeat and fuck your ass up. So the symbology would have just would have started out with like wings and whatnot. But then by the time you get over to Asia, you don't really see a lot of like wings. You see a lot of like godly beings of different colors, which would have been like explaining the change of your color with like breeding, interacting with different climates, stuff like that. When you get in a different soil, and you in the winter time, in the summertime, I mean, when it's hot, they would put soil on their skin to protect them from the sun. So with the different types of soils, as they migrated, they would have different types of colors on their skin. Red soil, black soil, white soil. Stuff like that. So it makes you wonder. Anyway, 47 minutes of me ranting to myself.